Holy butts, Batman! It's Day 9 Daily number 385, where we rotate the camera on camera and learn to be a better gamer. We're examining LiquidZenio. In part number 1, we saw him set himself up marvelously with all sorts of upgrades, drones, expansions, hatches, because he was pretty much left worry-free. He even managed to sneak in some spine crawlers and some queens and all that sort of fun jazz. And now, in part 2, we got the chance, or I guess previously in part 2, we got the chance to see him get really messed with. Some more Hellions came up early, followed up by a big Hellion Marauder push. And we got the chance to see what was messed with and what wasn't. We saw that the Spire, Lair, Baneling Nest, and all the extractor timings were pretty much unchanged from game to game. The drone count a little less. The hatchery and upgrade counts definitely behind. But the most important thing that we are seeing is that our Terran opponent has nothing. Absolutely nothing. He has 6 Marines, a Hellion. Terran is in defense. Freak out. Cry, sob, Mom. Mom, I had a bad day. It turned for Zerg. Oh, honey, it'll be all right. That's how Terran is right now. Let's see how Zerg ends up coping with this. Just as in the game where we were unmessed with, building just a couple of Banelings. And this is a really great technique that we didn't really see Zenio do in the previous game, or I should say in game number 1, but here in game number 2, when our opponent is suddenly on the passive foot, and when would he be on the passive foot? Oh gee, I don't know, maybe after he lost a huge army? Just walk up with those Banelings and burrow them. In game number 1, Terran had a huge army, was much farther forward, and we didn't have those juicy spots where we could burrow. In this game, juicy, juicy all the way. And now that we have our 3rd hatcheries up, everything seems to be quite good. This game is going to end up being about 30 minutes long. And for the next, I would say, 10 minutes or so, we're going to see some pretty fairly standard play out of Zenio. Getting his +1 upgrade. How do the other upgrades look? Well, he got Carapace first, which is increasingly becoming the norm in this matchup. People used to get attack first, but they value having the Baneling to actually reach the opponent without dying, as opposed to doing damage when they do get there. And here it comes. Oh, yeah! Don't you love this game? That's right, I do. Thank you, TeamLiquid.net, for providing me the link-a-rink-a-roo. Everything else is pretty straightforward. I mean, he's not going absolutely crazy with the drone production. Still making sure to get some Zerglings before he ends up getting a lot. The big things in my eyes that are kind of making Zenio a special player is the fact that this extra queen is always out really aggressively spreading creep. Zenio holding his key watchtowers for the defensive side of things. He's getting these extractors up very quickly at his expansion. He'll still be getting these extractors up quickly at this expansion. And now that he has 2 evolution chambers, he's just going to slowly begin trying to catch up with the upgrades. In the last game, Zenio had 2-2 started at 10 minutes and 30 seconds. By 11 minutes, they were already chugging well along. In this game, he's a little bit behind, but that's okay, because the Terran opponent is quite a ways behind. And despite all that craziness that happened in the early game, Zenio has set himself up to be in stellar condition. And now we have a pretty typical TVZ on our hands, so in case any of you are not familiar with standard TVZ, that's what we're doing for the remainder of part 3. Isn't that cool? We didn't have to worry too much about what happened in the early game. We wiggled our way comfortably back, and as our 4th hatch is getting ready to pop out, that's when we begin making drones again. No extreme logic really needed, just thinking about things in a very simple way. Burrow Banelings, still in good condition. The Mutalisks have not really tried to pierce deep into the worker lines, deep into any sort of critical things. They're just sort of casually poking at the front. And what's the big thing that they kept poking for? The expansions. Do continually check on your opponent's expansions, because that's the most important thing in all of StarCraft 2 strategy. If anyone ever asks me, do you think getting Broodlords fast is good? My answer is going to be, how many expansions does he have? If he's expanding a lot, then yeah, it's really good. He can't put any pressure on you at all. If he's low on expansions, you might be dead before you get the Broodlords out. Very, very important thing to do. And per expectation, he's poking in here, trying to take out a command center. Could be any vulnerable building at this point, as I really don't think that Terran is equipped to take a fourth anytime soon. This is a great move by this guy, whatever his identity ends up being, because he traps the Mutalisks. Yeah! And he uses this opportunity to load up a medevac and go for it. Isn't that a nice little play? One thing I think that Zenio does that's a little bit of a mistake, he keeps his Zerglings rallied here. If you are ever able to get this much map vision, and especially if you have like a burrowed Ling here, keep your Zerglings like here, in a location where you can end up defending against multiple angles of drop. Only after he starts really getting up a lot of these expansions, that's when we see Zenio begin to get his infestation pit up. Now there's I would say most of the decisions are pretty autopilot-y, right? We want a lot of drones. Cool, we have 87 drones. We're going to be making spine crawlers here to defend it. Pretty straightforward. Upgrading our Zerglings, very straightforward. Have 1/1. Some players are really adamant about getting good Mutalisk upgrades. I would say +1 is very standard. Everything other than that is a little bit stylistic, so that's okay if you don't want to get those extra upgrades. Overlord speed, if you don't get this, that's actually terrible. Oh my god, holy crap, get Overlord speed. There's like 50% of Zergs seem not to get it. Get it, oh my god, get it. And of course the infestation pit after we're getting a lot of geysers is really good. The one thing that not a lot of people do, other than this speed overlord, that's really important, is if you think you're going to be delayed by a little bit getting this hive, such as in this game, make sure that you get a lot of hatcheries. Because what you are going to use to defend yourself from those middle timing attacks are going to be Zerglings, Banelings, and Mutalisks. In particular, your Zerglings are going to be dying off a lot. You better have a great way to replenish a lot of Zerglings. We're going to see this kick into gear in a little bit. I can sum the last 4-5 minutes up with he's harassing with Mutalisks and building the normal units he's supposed to. He will now use Mutalisks and Zerglings to harass his opponent as he's supposed to. Don't overthink it. Just building stuff, harassing, injecting, getting layer, getting the big upgrades, scouting, burrowing, using speed overlords. Look at him. Look at that. Look at that. Look at him scouting those expansions against a Terran, but Terran's not supposed to mass expand. Well, you know what? There's always a jerk that does mass expand, and you don't want to lose to him. Per usual, Zenio doing the great creep spread. Great, great, great. When your opponent moves out, that's when you begin the Baneling production. How many Banelings does he have? 2. They're here. How many of you built too many Banelings early on? How many of you did that? That's right. You built those Banelings too early. You should be waiting till right when he's getting ready to push out. That's when you build those Banelings. Hey, well, what happens if I save my money and don't build those Banelings? Then you get an extra 4th hatchery up. Where this money for this 4th hatchery came from your conservation of Banelings early on. That's where that money ended up going. What happens if he moves out early and I'm forced to build a lot of Banelings? Perfect. Build the Banelings. Don't get the 4th fast. If he's pushing out early, then he's only on 2 bases, and you don't want 4 of your own bases early on because your economy hasn't kicked in with them. They're just vulnerabilities. Alright, try to cut off reinforcements and isolate, as he's supposed to. Simpos. Still building Lings and Banelings, and thank goodness we have all these extra hatches, because look at the production that we are able to do. Oops, we got into a little bit of an off engagement where we lost some Zerglings. No big deal. Remax on him instantly. And in fact, on the Zenio cam, we can even click on all these hatches that he has. And we can... Why can't I click on them? Why can I not click on them? How does that work? Can I click on them now? Wait a minute. Oh, control groups, normal. Jeez. Who's been on my computer? Yeah, we can see that there's, well, it looks like Zenio uses the weirdest hotkey setup ever. Oh, whoa, look at that. He hotkeys all the hatches that are near one another in one set. Huh, funky. But you'll notice he has 9 larvae here. He has another 9. None. He has 3 here. He has a good amount of larvae to be able to replenish a lot of Zerglings. And still upgrading. Now, Banelings are, in a sense, the big damage dealers. But what's great about Zenio is with all this creep spread, the Zerglings end up being just as large a threat to all of this. The Banelings only deal damage if you can actually make final contact with your opponent. Very smartly, Zenio ends up retreating. Doesn't want to overly engage. Doesn't want to just go all the way. And then once the stim wears off and the opponent must do a second stim, Zenio rolls right on in again. Now this may have looked really bad for Zenio against like a super best of the world Terran. You're always going to have to be really careful in these engagements. Just general good play by the Terran player. These sorts of positions can be a little bit annoying for Zerg, but they're definitely not unwinnable by any means. And thank goodness we're safe. Now, that looked a little bit scary now, didn't it? This is, again, just like in that early game spot, it's so easy to go, oh no, he killed this expansion, First of all, before I say anything else, look at the minimap. Look at the coverage that this glorious minimap is providing us. Zenio sees pretty much everything. From the Terran point of view, Terran just has this watchtower, is completely in the dark. Come to the unit station. Terran has 41 Marines compared to our... let's see. He has not the highest amount of barracks, given the fact that he has 3 bases. I'm actually surprised that these things aren't up. That actually kind of blows my freaking mind. 41 Marines might sound like a huge amount of Marines, but considering what we have on the way, we have so many Zerglings and such a huge production capacity and a lot of gas. It's not going to be that big of a deal. I generally think that if you have high upgrades and can even get the adrenal glands, Zerglings and Infestors are an extremely effective thing to replenish on to try to help you stay alive. Spawning pool is fine, not a big deal, especially with the transfuses. But we do have 7 Corruptors popping out right now. And the one thing that is, of course, great about Zenio is even in the midst of all of that, and even with a lot of extra larvae, a lot of times people will just hold down the Z button and just churn out a lot of Zerglings. He's going to expand. That's actually one of the hardest things to make yourself do. Just continually expand when you're under that kind of pressure. Continue to expand, continue to take a lot of damage. You're just going to take damage here on this map. Don't try to prevent this from ever happening. Terran just can do this. And of course, Zerg just pulls back, pulls back, pulls back, pulls back, pulls back. Not going for the immediate engagement, but just, yeah, I'm just going to sacrifice this. Yep, just going to build some Broodlords. Now, many little Zergies out there. Oh, by the way, that sucks. He didn't finish +3 armor. Woo, that was at 99%. That just stinks. Many Zergies will begin weeping and crying at this point. Oh no, I'm losing all these expansions. Oh gosh. When you're against ultra good Terrans, this just kind of happens a lot. And the Broodlords pop out. Oh gosh. Why is this actually not so bad for Zenio? That's an interesting question. Why is this actually not so terrible? Well, there's a couple of reasons. One, Terran doesn't have this base. Terran doesn't have this base. Terran is trying to get up a 4th. Look at Terran's money. Gone here, running really thin here. Terran is actually almost totally all in. We have this base, just now beginning to remine. We have this one. Hey, we just established this base. We're getting this one up. Zenio is quite comfortable. The only thing he has to do is make sure he can get his Broodlords into this engagement. Don't panic at points like this. And of course, pull back, regroup, pull back, regroup. Zenio can be a little bit more aggressive. Pull back, regroup. Continue to check up on expansions. Yep, we're good down there. Everything's great. Just carefully pulling back, regrouping. Hey, we have another spawning pool here. Oh, we killed our pool? Oh, wow, that's pretty cool. And you know, it's kind of funny to think about what this means to have lost the pool. Ordinarily, it's just like, well, killing his pool is good, so I'll just kill his pool. But what did I just say? Terran is all in. He really does not have any follow-throughs unless he gets a 4th expansion up. Because everything in StarCraft 2 is built around expansion. So in a sense, Terran is saying, I better make my final all-in big attack all the more effective by killing off this pool. So in my eyes, if I'm Zerg, I just want to say, I just got to stay alive until my pool's done, and then I'm going to have a million billion Zerglings, and I can continue defending somewhat easily. And that's exactly what we see with 72 Zerglings popping out. Really straightforward cleanup. Oh, look at those. Free medevacs. Sure, he lost this expansion, and that's our natural, and that always feels so scary. But because we're totally awesome, and we're checking on all his expansions all the time, once we end up engaging here, we have some clear paths for these Zerglings to go along. The late game Zerg vs. Terran, you might think this is the late game. Infestor Broodlord, that is about 80% of it. The other 20% is lots of counterattacks with Zerglings to pick off 4th and 5th bases. Terran will pretty much always get 3 bases, so don't stress and strain too much if you can't seem to just keep them on 2. The good ones know how to force the 3rd one up. And look at us in our late game still expanding, keeping some guys back. Easy cleanup! Zenio's just awesome. How awesome is that? The game is won, but I'm still going to continue commentating. Yeah. Now, when you lose a Broodlord army and you don't actually have that much money, don't feel obligated to rebuild the huge Broodlord army if he also doesn't have a huge army. Infestor Zergling, really good late game, especially with 3/3 upgrades and Adrenal. Counterattacks are the important thing in the late game. That's your important maneuver in the late game, is to counterattack at new expansions. And then he just builds a bunch of jazz and wins, as you might expect. Zenio, Zenio. I'll even full screen map it. Terran only has Marines. Yeah. If you simply just don't fear the Terran opponent, that will bring you much success. Kind of interesting to note that Zenio has actually not really opted to take his gas at these bases yet. Often players just go into auto late game mode, must acquire as much gas as possible. Acquiring gas is good for that initial shove of Broodlords, but Zerglings are really, really important in late game, especially after your big engagements have happened. And he's just low on stuff. Infestor, pretty good, man. Terran, look at this. Terran has had a bunch of floating command centers trying to find a home all base long. No, couldn't do it. I guess I'm done. I'm done with my commentary. I'm just gonna stop. Look, he says GG in about 20 seconds. Let's take some questions. Yeah, then you can help direct my lucid rambling. Is that the appropriate URL? It is. Loading it up, loading it up. Let's take some questions. Clearing the questions. Clearing the questions. All right, now I'm gonna refresh. That late game, I would say, was pretty standard. The one thing that would make it a little weird, I think, would be the loss of the natural expansion, which on that map is pretty typical in those positions. I wouldn't really be too shocked by that. But managing his opponent's expansion is really awesome. Yeah. Yeah. So Haze Mode says, Day 9. In the first game you mentioned that Zenio built early Lings in case of Hellions, and then a Spine in response to the Hellions. Why did Zenio not build the Spine in the second game? So what he specifically asked was, wouldn't the Spine be cheaper on Larva? It costs 1 Larva to build a Spine Crawler because of the drone, and it costs 7 Larva to build the Roaches. There's 2 reasons. One, it's a little bit to do with style. It's a little bit like, hey, do I want to just answer the Hellions with some defense? Or do I want to head on, not just shut down the Hellions, but also push him all the way back to his base? Chef does that sort of Hellion play on a lot of different maps. And it's quite hard to do on Antigua Shipyard because the distances are just so huge. The big thing in my eyes, though, is that on Antigua Shipyard, you have a much more manageable space at the front to deal with. You don't have as easily manageable a space on Tal'Darim Altar. So not only is it harder to control that area, like, hell, if he gets past your initial defenses, on Tal'Darim Altar, let me open up StarCraft 2 here. On Tal'Darim Altar, you have this. That is a nightmare to prevent Hellions from walking up. Whereas on Antigua Shipyard, you have like a ramp, so you can hold that a little bit better. So on Antigua, just the general defensive plays are a little bit stronger. Or I guess I should say a little bit more comfortable. And plus, you can just straight bring the noise again with the roaches as well. You can hold off and just attack, just like Zenio did. So I think another great follow-up question to that is, well, what happens if we are on Antigua Shipyard and our opponent does the same sort of push? This is one of the reasons why Zenio built a second spine crawler. He built a couple lings, then he saw the Hellions, and then so he went spine, and then more lings, and a little while later just built another spine crawler. Easy peasy defense against that sort of push again. Because if it's just 3-4 Marauders and like 7-8 Hellions, if you have a lot of lings and 2 spines and a lot of queens, you're going to be in good shape, especially on that creep. Let's see here. So Leon Trout says, now this question surprises me. Day 9, even with such a clear early lead, Zenio took 30 plus minutes to capitalize. Anything you would have liked to see different? I actually don't think Zenio had such a clear lead at all in that game. Actually, this is one of the interesting things that happens when a player is being really aggressive, and also just sort of a facet of Tal'Darim Altar. When you're up against an aggressive player, you're pushed back, and you kind of have to play aggressively. Or, defensively. So, Zenio, I think, did a great job of that, just defending, setting himself up nicely. On Tal'Darim Altar, you just get 3 bases as Terran. You just straight up, you're going to get those 3 bases as Terran. And there's not really a good way to really pierce through and kill him off. It's actually true in any matchup on that map. All good players pretty much get 3 bases with their respective race. So the biggest problem on Tal'Darim is figuring out how to shut down fourths. So that is what Zenio did in this game, and I really like the way he did it. That'll happen in pretty much any match. I mean, PVTs on that map go really, really long. There are some cases where you can kill your opponent on 2 bases, but if you're playing against a really good player who gets how to defend after his attacks, it'll just sort of wind up being that way. I don't think there's anything wrong with the way Zenio played it out. Maybe could have gotten his Broodlords a smidge faster to deal with that attack a little bit better, but I mean, other than that, I was into it. And maybe been a little more on the ball with his upgrades. I think that would have been awesome. Let's go ahead and take more questions. I'm actually going to just take one more because this daily's been going on for a long time. It's like 8:30. I'm terrible at managing my time now. Wow. Let's see. I'm looking for questions specific to Zerglings. People are asking me about Protoss versus Terran. That's funky. This is Zerg week. Yeah. I'm petering out in terms of energy. I need to get some food. I can't ramble at the same time and try to read these questions. Here we go. Here's from Ramas DNR. Dear Day 9, are there any strategic flaws in just skipping the Mutalisk and going straight to Zergling Infestor with an emphasis on upgrades and faster hive? Not really. I mean, Stefano does that pretty consistently. He actually almost never goes Mutalisks. It's important to think about what this means for all your attack timings, though. A lot of times there are some big Mutalisk, Zergling, Baneling counterattack timings that you can just straight win. They're like kill sequences in the game. And it's important not to, get too overly obsessed with that. The Ling Infestor style is very good at direct attacking. With the Mutalisk Zergling style, it's good at harassing, and you kind of have to harass. You should. You shouldn't be avoiding that too much. So when you do go for the Ling Infestor style, don't become obsessed with the fact that you're not able to harass that much. But you really do need to get the faster hive and start really bringing the noise in that way. There's really no strategic flaw with that at all. In fact, there are very little strategic flaws with a lot of variety in the matchup. I mean, even the Roach Ling Infestor mix, very, very good if you know how to pull it off. Even the Roach Ling Mutalisk plays and lots of expanding that Nest-T does, very, very strong. There's periods where it's been getting weaker, but you can still overcome it. And Nest-T has been doing some clever ways of overcoming by super delaying the layer. But for now, that ends the Day 9 Daily. See you for Fun Day Monday tomorrow. I'm done talking. Woo! Done!